Hello, I'm Meredith Blackwell, and I'm here at the International Mycological Congress 12 in Maastricht, Netherlands. And we're working on an oral history for Mycology project. And we're having one of our early interviews on the 14th of August, 2024. So please introduce yourself, and we would like to hear where you were born, where you got interested in fungi, and something about your research.
Okay, so I'm Rebecca Yahr. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia is where I grew up, and so I'm a Southern girl, and I moved away to California as soon as I could. So I went to California and I got a botany degree, and then I got a job out of my undergraduate at a field station at a place called Archbold Biological Station, and I was super lucky.
In Florida?
In Florida, okay. Lake Placid, Florida, middle of nowhere, Florida. A well-endowed field station where we had a plant ecologist and a bird biologist and a GIS person and just a handful of people. And I had an internship, and I was allowed to do whatever I wanted with my internship. And my advisor, supervisor, mentor there was a plant demographer. There was a rare lichen. It was an endangered lichen, one of 2 listed endangered lichens at the time, and no one knew anything about it. So I thought, this is an opportunity to, look down at the little things, because I always knew I liked the little things, and start working on a lichen. So I thought I'd do demography of this endangered lichen, which was impossible because I couldn't tell when it was alive or dead. I called Bruce McCune, because he was a friend of my advisor, to find out how do you tell if a lichen was dead, and he said, I never thought about that. So I realized it was kind of an open field. Anyway, I started working on that lichen, got interested in lichens, and then I went and did a PhD at Duke. And I was a student of Paula de Priest at the Smithsonian and Ritus Vilgeles at Duke. And here I sit, still doing lichenology.
Yeah, no, very interesting, because we haven't interviewed one lichenologist yet. So you're the first. Yeah, and so what undergraduate school, California? What?
University of California at Davis.
At Davis, okay.
At Davis, yeah.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Because it's a mycological school too. I guess we think of Berkeley a lot, but
right.
Also mycology, a lot of mycology
there was,
too.
And they had a plant pathologist who was not involved with any of the teaching. I never even met him when I was there.
Was that Ed Butler?
Do you know, that's not the name that I remember,
okay.
but I don't know.
Ed Butler may have been before
Someone
your
had
time.
just retired, and I can't remember his name, I'm sorry to say, but Andrea Gargis, who was Paula's postdoc, was hired in because she was at Berkeley with John Taylor.
Yeah.
So she came in to teach our mycology class, and she was a fantastic teacher, super good teacher.
And that's about the time I went to John's lab to learn PCR.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because she was in his lab at the time.
Right.
Andrea was.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would have been, when did I start? I think that would have been around 2000.
Yeah.
Yeah, when that was all
interesting.
Starting. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got your degree, and how did you work it with Ritus and Paula?
So when I was working in Florida at the field station, I was working on Cladonia perforata, and being Cladonia, Paula had just gotten an NSF PEAT grant. So I don't know if you remember those PEAT grants, Partnerships for Excellent Enhancing
that year.
Expertise.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
Oh, so fantastic. Thank you for funding a lichen project then. So Paula had a PEAT grant to work on Cladoniaceae, and she had heard that I was working on a Cladonia, so she invited me to her lab to learn PCR, because she was using PCR at that time. So I went up there to just see how that got on. We seemed to get on okay. She had a funded PhD place, so she offered me that place. So the money came from the PEAT grant, but of course it's the Smithsonian, they're not a degree granting institute, so
you were affiliated with Duke.
With Duke, where she had done her PhD.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a mycologist there wasn't a lichenologist on staff who could take students at the time. Bill and Chiquita Culberson were there, but not taking students. So Ritus agreed to be my supervisor.
And Francois was in school. He was Ritus' student.
He wasn't there at that time.
He wasn't there
when I started. Francois wasn't there yet.
Okay, so he came a little bit later.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So I had Paula at the Smithsonian, and I would go and work in her lab sometimes, and then I ended up mostly staying at Duke because Duke was an amazing place to be a graduate student.
Yeah.
There were so many bright people all around me, and you know them. You know Dan, Dan Hank, and Tim James were there at the same time. So it was a huge group of wonderful people.
We interviewed Dan day before yesterday. He was in my lab as an undergraduate.
I know. Yeah,
he was
that's right.
a great student.
Yeah.
No, that was a really exciting time also because of the techniques.
Right.
It was just really exciting.
And Duke was really invested in keeping very current. So we were sequencing things for $1 a sequence. They had invested in a robot and 96 well plates, and it was amazing. You know, I generated so much data. Yeah. So I was surrounded by people like Rita's who were very human and so kind and supportive and really free to allow people to sort of generate ideas that they wanted to follow up with while steering. So I was not allowed to do a taxonomy project. He was clear about that. There will be no taxonomy done here, which I was annoyed at the time, but I think it was a really good steer because I wouldn't have got my job if I had done what I had planned to do.
Yeah.
So instead, you know, I had current methods, which was a smart move. Yeah.
Right.
So it was just a great opportunity to be working in that lab at that time with wonderful people all around.
When I was in school, the technique du jour was microscopy, transmission electron microscopy. So that was what we were all learning, but it carries you all kinds of directions.
Oh, it would be,
so it works well.
Yeah. No,
so
that's
it's
really
good
powerful.
to always have the new technique, though. So what are you doing now?
So now I work at the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh, and I'm one of 2 lichenologists. There are not a lot of institutes that have that. So I'm the molecular biologist, evolutionary biologist, and then we have an ecologist as well, which is Chris Ellis, and he's my husband as well.
Oh, okay.
And I met him at the IMC 2002 in Oslo.
Wow.
So that's a funny little connection. So we work together, but not together very much because we kind of have separate research streams. So I do lots of different things. I do IUCN conservation. Right now I'm one of the co-chairs for the specialist group for lichens. So I'm trying to help sort of motivate and encourage and organize, you know, international lichen conservation to some extent. I try to work with local conservation in Scotland, so we support the nature conservation organizations with our work. I do inventory and a lot of barcoding stuff. We're involved with a bunch of big, you know, consortium projects, which is great at the European level, and then I do teaching and outreach. So it's a whole range of things.
So what university do you teach through, or do you?
Yeah, I don't teach at a university much. I get invited, you know, now and then.
But you have special courses though at the garden.
So what we do is we deliver a master's course for I think it's called Plant Biodiversity. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be in such trouble for not knowing the name of the course.
That's okay.
Something about plant biodiversity and evolution.
But it is
but it's a master's offered to the University of Edinburgh.
Okay, that's what I meant.
But we deliver it.
Yeah.
So it's all at the Botanic Garden.
Yeah.
So they're up the road, you know, a few miles away, but the students are all with us all day, every day. And I teach I coordinate a cryptogams course. So fungi, algae, lichens, you know, what else is in it? Bryophytes, conifers, ferns, anything that doesn't have a flower.
Yeah.
It's in my module. So that's great. It's fun interacting with the students and taking them on trips.
And where do the students come from? Are they mainly local Scottish students?
No, they're from all around the world. So it used to be a wide range of a lot of Europeans, but always from everywhere, just a few students from all around the world. And then with Brexit, things have changed quite a lot. We don't have anywhere near as many European students. So there are no sort of easy ways for European students to come to the UK anymore. So now we have much more, we have many more students from Asia now, which is nice. So there's a more mix there, but many fewer Europeans, which is interesting. We still have a lot of Europeans coming through for postdocs and things, but it's a different environment. Brexit has really changed things.
One of the early IMC meetings I went to, Roy Watling, I met him, and I know he was is he retired from the garden?
He's retired, yeah.
And I remember an interesting paper. He talked about puffballs, masses of puffballs found along Hadrian's Wall.
Oh, wow.
And, figuring out the use of them, they thought perhaps it was to stop bleeding with the spores.
Oh, gosh.
But I always remember that talk. But the other thing I've heard is that he had started a fungus garden, like wood decay fungi and all sorts of plants that would be infected. Is that still going?
That's right, yeah. So the Royal Botanic Garden Edinburgh, we have a beautiful garden in Edinburgh, but we have 3 regional gardens, and they're scattered all across Scotland. And one of them is about an hour south of us in a really beautiful kind of old arboretum on the grounds of a big old house. And he helped them set aside an area that wasn't going to be gardened at all. So it's called the Heronwood Cryptogam Sanctuary.
Okay.
And it was very fully inventoried by Roy and all of the people who he's worked with over the years. And it's just been a set aside. See what's there. There's a little hut, a little wooden hut with interpretation in there about what's going on here and why it's valuable.
Are people interested in it?
Yes, they are. We've got a new, I think, a re-emphasis on explaining diversity and the research that we do at the Botanic Garden right now. So we're going to kind of revamp a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But they've been super supportive all along in developing. Like, we've got a little lichen trail. We've got a booklet that you can borrow a hand lens with at all of the gardens. It's like super time consuming to develop that stuff, but it's really popular. And some of the students that come through as master's students got hooked because of the little lichen trail, you know? So these things feel like a lot of, you know, like, so I didn't do as many research papers as I might have done, but actually I've got somebody new involved in the field that wouldn't have otherwise done.
Really good outreach.
So yeah, it's really a nice opportunity because we have about 1 million people who interact with the garden every year. And if we can get a small number of those people hooked on fungi, then that's a benefit.
I remember one meeting we had, the Mycological Society of America we met in Portland, and I happened to walk around to a different side of the building where we were meeting, and lo and behold, there was a huge conifer that was laying out, and there was a lot of interpretation about what was going on with the decay and what would happen, and there were fungi on it.
Wow.
So I thought that was really, really neat. And I know that Dr. Luttrell at Georgia, he had a garden he planted so that they would be plants that were easily infected with local rust fungi and smuts and things.
Wow.
So I've always been interested in that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Haven't really done anything about it, but I do have some plants in my yard at home that collect fungi. So
that's great.
Yeah,
that's
but
great.
It's really neat. There ought to be more of these set up.
Yeah, I think the botanic gardens around the world, I think, are starting to pick up on this a little bit. So in Finland, I think it's Helsinki, they have a stumpery.
Yeah.
So they've put some stumps upside down, old conifer stumps, and they're architecturally beautiful, and they've set them up in such a way that not much is going to grow on them except fungi. And they managed to get permission, I guess, to harvest them from a forest, so they were already colonized by lichens.
Neat.
And then they put a bunch of reindeer lichens at the base of this stuff, and it's really beautiful.
Oh, that's really nice.
So it's
I didn't
beautiful
know about
and
it.
attractive, and you know. So the people are getting pretty creative with this now.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. So what about your research right now?
So research right now, I'm doing some work on in the mountains of Scotland. People don't think of Scotland as having a lot of mountains. They're not very tall, but they're really extreme because we're at such high latitude. We're at the same latitude as Newfoundland, which is crazy to think about because it's really pretty warm compared to Newfoundland. But when you're at 1,000 meters, you're in Arctic tundra, proper Arctic tundra. So we have long-lying snow patches, which we're losing because of climate change. So we've got an incredible climate gradient in this tiny, tiny country. And up at the tops, they're just really poorly surveyed. So the last person who did work on the montane lichens in Scotland was Alan Friday, who did a PhD in the 1990s. And he was really interested in the ecology of the lichens, but he realized there was no taxonomic underpinning. So he started working on the taxonomy. But there's still lots to do with that. And I guess one of the big initiatives that we're involved with at the Botanic Garden is that sort of underpinning taxonomic background, right? We're doing a lot of collecting. We have a really huge herbarium. We just digitized the 1,000,000th specimen that's been imaged. It's great. But building that as a reference collection with all the barcodes is a big part of what we do now, right? So we're involved with big European barcoding initiatives, and the mountains is where I've been focusing my energy for that. So it's collecting, and it's doing the taxonomy of the montane stuff. And so that's one of my things. And then the other thing I've always been interested in is the rainforests. So we've had some PhD students, and we're about to get new PhD students looking at the dispersal and management of the lichens in these places. So
and where
our rainforests, the Celtic rainforest. I should have been clear about that.
No, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, the western fringe of the UK with its remnant rainforests. You know, there's not a lot left, and some of it's in really, really good shape. And you would be amazed to see it. It's probably like going to British Columbia or Tasmania.
Right.
So the trees are not that interesting, but the lichens and the bryophytes there are incredible. So really, really rich, really, really diverse, and in really good condition. So there's a lot of conservation effort in the rainforests, but there's still a lot of open questions.
Yeah, that's good to bring in that there's some non-tropical rainforest.
Yeah.
Because most people these days especially think of the tropics.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it sounds like lots going on then.
Yeah, there's lots of little things. I think as all mycologists would recognize, there's not a lot of us in any given institute, so you have to wear a bunch of different hats depending on what day you're going to work, right?
Yeah.
So that's the way it goes.
I was a sole mycologist in my institution for a long time. And
that's right.
And then Kathy Ain came for a few years and left, but then so did I. But it's nice to have other mycologists. But today it's easy. You know, we used to have the telephone and high telephone bills. But
that's
now
right.
we've got internet.
It's really different, isn't it? Yeah. So I was in charge of the British Lichen Society's meetings when COVID all happened. So I kind of had to dive into the deep end of making one of those big online conferences happen. But it was great. It's been great. It's built the number of people who've been involved, and so that's been great. Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to emphasize about your job? Or?
Gosh, I don't know. I just to thank all the people like you and like Redis who have been so important in building a community and welcoming people, and I've always felt just wonderfully welcomed by the mycologists, which is nice.
Yeah.
So
well, that's the way I started out. Everybody was wonderful to me when I was a student.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been a really nice journey, and I'm really glad to be here at IMC for sure. So thank you for having a chance to talk.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. It's nice to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.